The Galactic Academy of Cultural Studies prided itself on being the most prestigious cross-species educational institution in the Orion Arm. At least that's what the brochure claimed, right next to the photo of their suspiciously well-groomed Glorban student, who was definitely wearing contact lenses for all four eyes. The truth was slightly less glamorous, particularly on Cultural Exchange Day, when the Academy's insurance premiums traditionally skyrocketed. MSKR Thick, whose full name contained 17 clicking sounds and 2 subsonic rumbles that most species couldn't pronounce without serious medical intervention, was methodically applying her third coat of stress-suppressant pheromones. Her antennae twitched nervously as she reviewed the day's schedule on her datapad, mandibles clicking in what her therapist assured her was not an anxiety response. "Everything is under control," she muttered to herself, her exoskeleton shifting through various shades of green. "The security force fields are charged, the medical bay is on standby, and the fire suppression system has been upgraded after last month's incident." She deliberately didn't think about the fact that humans apparently considered chemical burns in their mouth to be flavor. The classroom itself was a testament to inclusive design, featuring everything from low-gravity zones for the floatlings to reinforced titanium seats for the heavy worlders. The ceiling height accommodated even the tallest giraffids, though poor TK Tall still had to duck through doorways. The room's environmental controls worked overtime to maintain 17 different optimal temperature zones, creating interesting weather patterns near the center of the room. The students filed in or floated or oozed or teleported, which was strictly against school policy, but nobody wanted to be the one to tell the quantum-shifted kids they couldn't do their thing. Among them was Zara Chen Martinez, the only human in this year's cohort, walking with that peculiar bipedal gait that still made some of the more traditional species uncomfortable. How anything could balance on just 2 legs without either psychic assistance or a gravitational manipulation field remained a topic of heated debate in the faculty lounge. Zara took her seat in the reinforced section, not because humans were particularly heavy, but because the school board had decided that anything from a death world needed extra structural support on principle. She offered a smile to her classmates, displaying those terrifying flat teeth that humans used to grind plant matter and flesh alike. Several of her classmates instinctively activated their defensive mechanisms, resulting in a beautiful display of spines, chromatophores, and one unfortunately timed ink cloud from young HFY. "Now Class MS." KR Thick began, her voice modulator carefully calibrated to be soothing to all known sentient frequency ranges. "Today is our Cultural Exchange Day. Each of you will present an item or aspect of your homeworld's culture that you believe best represents your species' achievements or daily life." She paused, antennae twitching again. "And yes, before anyone asks, the items have all been pre-screened by our xenobiological safety department." This last part was delivered with a pointed look at Zara, who managed to appear simultaneously innocent and amused, a uniquely human expression that had been added to the Academy's threat assessment guidelines 3 years ago. "We'll proceed alphabetically by spiral arm location MS." KR Thick announced, secretly grateful that Earth's position put humans near the end of the list. It would give the medical team time to finish their coffee. "Remember, the goal is cultural understanding and appreciation. Let's keep all defense mechanisms inactive unless absolutely necessary." She glanced at her datapad, already wondering if she should have applied a 4th coat of those pheromones. Who would like to go first? The class looked around nervously, each student hoping someone else would volunteer. Meanwhile, Zara sat quietly in her reinforced chair, wearing what humans called a Mona Lisa smile, and expression that had recently been classified as a potential psychological weapon by 3 different species. The presentations started innocently enough. Belorp of the Gelatinous Collective shared their species' most prized achievement, a self-harmonizing crystal that produced soothing quantum vibrations. At least that's what the brochure said. To most of the class, it looked like a glorified paperweight that occasionally hiccuped. Next up was DNX, one of the photosynthetic philosophers, who spent 15 minutes explaining the cultural significance of their ceremonial light-gathering leaves. The presentation might have gone on longer, but they had to pause for photosynthesis apparently. Giving speeches consumed more energy than expected. "Fascinating MS," KR Thick commented, though her color-shifting exoskeleton betrayed her relief at the brevity. "Who's next?" In the back, VRXC Shi, the Void Dancer, demonstrated their species' traditional greeting dance. It was quite beautiful, right up until the point where they accidentally phased through the floor. The maintenance crew had warned about this. Apparently, interpretive dance and quantum uncertainty didn't mix well with the building's foundation. As each student presented, Whispers and, in some cases, telepathic broadcasts circulated about what the human might bring. Last year's human exchange student had introduced the concept of birthday parties, which had resulted in 3 diplomatic incidents and 1 small temporal paradox when the quantum-shifted kids tried to celebrate all their birthdays simultaneously across multiple dimensions. I heard MK ticks whisper to their cluster mate, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with gossip, that humans keep miniature versions of their planet's apex predators in their living spaces. For fun. That can't be true, replied Zykes, their crystalline structure vibrating with skepticism. Even Deathworlders aren't that. Oh wait, remember the spicy food incident? The entire class shuddered collectively at the memory. 2 months ago, Zara had brought something called ghost pepper sauce for the interspecies culinary exchange. The resulting chaos had led to 17 new safety protocols, 3 evolutionary leaps among the more adaptable species, and a strongly worded letter from the Galactic Health and Safety Commission. It wasn't that bad, Zara had protested at the time, while the medical bay dealt with students whose taste buds had achieved sentience and were demanding voting rights. Back in the present, P. Tula, the empath, was finishing their presentation about their species' emotional sharing crystals. Several students were still crying from the shared experience, though whether from genuine emotion or allergies to crystal dust remained unclear. Thank you, P. Tula, Ms. K.R. Thick said, discreetly wiping what might have been tears from her compound eyes. And please remember to warn us next time before broadcasting your grandmother's wedding memories. Some of us are still processing the traditional dance of 7,000 sorrows. As the list of presenters grew shorter, the tension in the room became almost tangible. In fact, it was tangible the etheric students were stress manifesting again, creating small clouds of visible anxiety that floated near the ceiling. Did anyone else notice that Zara came in with a larger containment unit today, whispered TK Tall, ducking to avoid their own nervous energy cloud. Maybe it's more of that coffee substance they introduced last semester, suggested HFY, who had finally cleaned up their defensive ink splash. The one that made the quantum-shifted kids vibrate through 6 dimensions simultaneously. No, countered VRXEG, who had managed to rephase back through the floor. I overheard her talking to the xenobiology department. Something about getting proper clearance this time and ensuring the containment fields can handle purring. What's purring? Asked 7 students simultaneously, while 3 others immediately began researching emergency evacuation procedures. MSKR Thick pretended not to hear any of this, though her antennae were now twitching at a frequency known to interfere with small electronic devices. She'd reviewed Zara's presentation proposal, of course, but the human had been suspiciously vague about certain details. Something about wanting it to be a surprise, and trust me, everyone will love it once they stop screaming. The instructor glanced at her emergency beacon, confirming it was fully charged. She'd had it installed after the exercise demonstration day when they'd all learned that humans could continue running long after most species would have sensibly died of exhaustion. The memory of Zara jogging cheerfully while explaining runner's high to a horrified classroom still haunted her dreams. Finally, there was only one name left on the list. MSKR Thick's exoskeleton had settled into a peculiar shade of anxiety green that xenobiologists would later classify as pre-human presentation syndrome. Well then, she announced, her voice modulator struggling to maintain its soothing tone, Zara Chen Martinez, you're our final presenter for today. Please remember the new guidelines about acceptable levels of surprise and mandatory recovery periods. Zara stood up, grinning that unsettling human grin that showed far too many teeth for anyone's comfort. Oh, don't worry, she said, reaching for her containment unit. I brought something really special this time. Something soft and fuzzy. The entire class immediately assumed defensive positions. They'd learned the hard way that when humans described something as fun or harmless, it was time to activate all available protection protocols. Zara approached the front of the classroom with the kind of casual confidence that only a Deathworlder could maintain while carrying what the safety sensors were registering as threat level. Why would you even do this? The containment unit, a sparkly pink thing decorated with what appeared to be cartoon fish, swayed gently in her grip. For today's presentation, Zara announced, I'd like to introduce you to a very special member of my family. Your genetic offspring, shrieked TK Tall, already halfway through the ceiling's emergency escape hatch. What? No, Zara laughed. This is Professor Whiskers, my cat. With theatrical flourish, she opened the containment unit. Time seemed to slow as a massive, furry creature emerged with liquid grace. The Maine Coon cat, weighing in at a terrifying 8.5 kilos of muscle, fluff and absolute majesty, stepped out and immediately claimed MS. KR Thick's desk as its new domain. The classroom erupted into chaos. HFY released enough defensive ink to redecorate half the classroom in midnight blue. The quantum-shifted students accidentally teleported themselves into next week's lecture. They'd be back once they figured out the temporal coordinates. 3 of the etheric students spontaneously evolved the ability to turn invisible, though their panic clouds gave away their positions. By the 7 sacred singularities MS, KR Thick screeched, her translator failing spectacularly as she reverted to primal clicking. That's an apex predator. Professor Whiskers, apparently unimpressed by the pandemonium, began grooming his magnificent tail. He's domesticated, Zara protested over the sound of multiple security protocols activating simultaneously. Look how fluffy he is. Fluff is not a safety feature, came a shout from somewhere under a desk. The classroom's automated defense systems, sensing multiple spike and stress pheromones, activated in sequence. First came the containment fields, which Professor Whiskers ignored with the kind of disdain only cats can master. Then the anti-predator sonic deterrence kicked in, which only succeeded in making the cat's ears twitch irritably. "Oh great," muttered Zara, "now you've annoyed him." Professor Whiskers stood up, stretched in a way that displayed every one of his impressive muscles, and let out a yawn that showcased a set of teeth evolved for efficient meat processing. Several students who had been considering emerging from their hiding spots quickly reconsidered. "Look," Zara said, approaching the desk where Professor Whiskers had established his kingdom. "He's super friendly. Watch." The entire class watched in horror as Zara, clearly demonstrating the famous human disregard for personal safety, reached out and began scratching behind the predator's ears. The sound that emerged from Professor Whiskers sent new waves of panic through the room. It's activating its attack vibrations screamed B-Lorp, their gelatinous form quivering in terror. "That's purring," Zara explained, as Professor Whiskers flopped onto his side, exposing his fluffy belly. "It means he's happy." "Happy? About what?" asked VRXXshe, who had partially phased through a wall in panic, but was now watching with cautious curiosity. "About everything. He's a cat. They're basically tiny gods, and they know it." Professor Whiskers, as if to demonstrate this point, began kneading MS. KR Thick's favorite stress relief cushion with his claws, maintaining direct eye contact with the instructor as he did so. The message was clear: this was his territory now. "The creature appears to be establishing dominance," noted DNX from their photosynthesis corner. "Fascinating. Also terrifying, but fascinating." MS KR Thick, who had managed to regain some of her professional composure if not her normal coloring, activated her emergency communicator. "Xenobiology department. Yes, the human brought a... What did you call it again?" "A cat," Zara beamed. "Short for category 5 adorable." "That's not what that means, and you know it, MS." KR Thick muttered before returning to her call. "Yes, we're going to need a full containment team. And perhaps some of those little string toys the briefing mentioned. And... what in the name of science is it doing now?" Professor Whiskers had begun the classic cat loaf position, tucking his paws under and transforming into what appeared to be a very smug, very furry loaf of bread. Once the initial panic subsided and the security teams confirmed that Professor Whiskers' threat level was chaotic neutral at best, Zara began her explanation. She pulled out a holoprojector while the cat continued to radiate smugness from his newly claimed throne atop MS KR Thick's desk. "So about 10,000 years ago on Earth," Zara started, displaying images of ancient civilizations, "humans figured out something pretty cool. Instead of just hunting animals or running away from them, we could make friends with them." "Your species' definition of making friends concerns me deeply," muttered MS KR Thick, who was maintaining what she considered a safe distance approximately 3 rooms away, watching through the security feed. "See, cats actually chose us," Zara continued, as Professor Whiskers began systematically knocking items off the desk while maintaining eye contact with each student. "When humans started storing grain, we got mice. When we got mice, cats showed up to hunt them. Then they realized humans would give them treats and warm places to sleep, and well." She gestured to Professor Whiskers, who was now somehow occupying 3 separate spots on the desk simultaneously, a feat that had the quantum-shifted students taking notes. "You're saying DNX ventured from their photosynthesis corner, that your species formed a mutual defense pact with predators. More like they tolerating us worshipping them for a few thousand years," Zara grinned. "Ancient Egyptians literally treated them like gods." Professor Whiskers' whiskers twitched in what seemed to be approval of this historical fact. But wait, MK Tix's bioluminescent spots pulsed with confusion. That's just one species. Surely your kind didn't. Oh, we domesticated loads of animals. Zara's enthusiasm made several students inch back. Dogs were first. They're like living security systems that love you unconditionally. We've got birds that can talk, fish that recognize faces, horses we ride around on. You ride other species. HFY's chromatophores displayed patterns indicating both horror and morbid curiosity. Look at this. Zara pulled up more hollows, showing various earth pets. This is my cousin's bearded dragon. It's literally a tiny dinosaur that likes watching TV. And here's my neighbor's parrot that learned to imitate the fire alarm so perfectly, the whole apartment complex had to be evacuated. 3 times. The class watched in fascinated horror as images of Earth's domesticated animals flashed by. A Great Dane lounging on a tiny couch. A cockatiel singing what Zara explained was something called death metal. A ball python wearing a tiny hat. But why, asked Vrxishi, who had finally fully rephased into normal space out of sheer curiosity. Because they're cute. And loyal. And Zara reached into her bag, pulling out something that jingled. Professor Whiskers' ears instantly pivoted forward like highly evolved tracking systems. Watch this, she said, holding up a small toy mouse filled with bells. The entire class held their breath as she tossed it. What followed was a display of predatory skill that would have made a military targeting system jealous. Professor Whiskers launched himself from the desk in a fluid motion that somehow bent several laws of physics, caught the toy in midair, executed a perfect combat roll purely for style points, and ended up sitting primly as if nothing had happened. That was actively terrifying. B-Lorp vibrated in distress. That was just playing, Zara beamed. You should see him when he gets the zoomies at 3 a.m. The what at when MS, Kr Thick's voice crackled through the intercom. Oh yeah, cats are crepuscular, most active at dawn and dusk. But they sometimes get these bursts of energy where they just— Zara made a series of chaotic hand gestures that somehow perfectly described every cat owner's late-night experience. Professor Whiskers chose this moment to demonstrate his athletic prowess by leaping to the top of a bookshelf that the engineering department had sworn was too high for any creature to reach. He looked down at his audience with the satisfaction of a being who knew they were witnessing greatness. But here's the really cool part. Zara continued, cats still have all their wild instincts. They're basically tiny tigers that have decided to be our roommates. They've got night vision, they can hear ultrasonic frequencies, their whiskers can detect air movement changes. And they land on their feet thanks to some really wild physics. Please don't throw the cat to demonstrate, MS. Kr Thick interjected quickly. But they choose to be our companions. They hunt for us, even when they know we have food. They protect their territory, our homes, from intruders. They even try to teach us to hunt. How do they teach you, asked TK Tall, immediately regretting the question. Well, Professor Whiskers keeps leaving half-dead space mice in my shoes. It's like having a very murdery personal trainer who's really disappointed in your hunting skills. The class spent a moment processing this information while Professor Whiskers began methodically rearranging MS. Kr Thick's carefully organized teaching materials into what he clearly considered a more aesthetically pleasing chaos. So what you're saying, summarized DNX, their leaves swaying thoughtfully, is that your species takes apex predators, convinces them to live in your dwellings, gives them silly names, and treats them like family members. Exactly, Zara replied. And sometimes we put little bow ties on them for special occasions. Professor Whiskers paused in his redecorating efforts to give Zara a look that clearly communicated his feelings about the bow tie incident. It was a look that contained multitudes, spoke of betrayal, and somehow also demanded treats as compensation for emotional damages. Humans, MS. Kr Thick's voice came through the intercom, carrying the weight of someone who was rapidly reevaluating every interaction she'd ever had with the species, are simultaneously the most terrifying and most puzzling species in the galaxy. The next phase of the presentation could best be described as a study in xenopsychology, with Professor Whiskers serving as both test subject and chief experimenter. MK Tix was the first to approach, their bioluminescent spots pulsing in a pattern that roughly translated to curiosity battling with self-preservation. Professor Whiskers, recognizing a potential new subject of worship, deployed his most devastating weapon, the slow blink. Oh, my sacred photons, MK Tix whispered, their lights dimming in awe. It's attempting non-violent communication. That's cat speak for I love you, Zara explained, while updating her xenobiology notes. Today's entry would definitely earn her extra credit. Subject Alpha. Professor Whiskers successfully initiated first contact with bioluminescent species through deployment of tactical affection. Meanwhile, the quantum-shifted students had developed a fascinating new approach to cat interaction. They would phase slightly out of normal space-time, reach out to pet the cat, and then quickly shift back if Professor Whiskers showed any signs of movement. This resulted in what appeared to be several ghostly hands repeatedly appearing and disappearing around the cat, who seemed to find the whole thing beneath his dignity to acknowledge. Remarkable, noted DNX from their gradually decreasing safety distance. The creature appears to be simultaneously interested in and completely disdainful of all attention. Their leaves rustled thoughtfully. Rather like my last relationship. HFY, still somewhat embarrassed about their earlier ink display, attempted to make amends by offering Professor Whiskers a piece of their traditional greeting kelp. The cat's response, a look of such profound offense that it bordered on performance art, would later be included in the Academy's Guide to Interspecies Diplomatic Faux Pas. Observation Log Entry 47 MS. Kr Thick dictated to her datapad, having finally worked up the courage to re-enter the classroom. Earth Predator displays characteristics previously thought incompatible. Lethal efficiency combined with, what did you call it, Zara? Floofiness, Zara supplied helpfully. I am not putting that in an official scientific document, MS. Kr Thick clicked, though her antennae betrayed amusement. Update subject demonstrates advanced environmental manipulation through what the human terms knocking things off surfaces for no reason. TK Tall, whose species was known for their cautious nature, had developed a unique strategy. They would extend their extraordinarily long neck from behind a desk, retreat at maximum speed if Professor Whiskers so much as twitched a whisker, then repeat the process from a different angle. The cat naturally had turned this into a game, pretending not to notice until the last possible moment before turning suddenly, sending TK Tall into another tactical retreat. It's toying with us, TK Tall observed, both terrified and impressed. Further observation, MS. Kr Thick continued, her professional tone slipping as Professor Whiskers began purring. The attack vibrations appear to have a paradoxical effect of reducing anxiety in nearby life forms. Note to self-research potential applications in diplomatic relations. B-Lorp, whose gelatinous form had finally stopped quivering in fear, made the breakthrough discovery that their natural shape-shifting abilities could be used to create the perfect cat bed. Professor Whiskers, recognizing a superior lounging surface when he saw one, promptly claimed B-Lorp as his new favorite furniture. I have been chosen, B-Lorp transmitted telepathically, their entire form glowing with pride. I cannot move without disturbing the sacred beast, but I have been chosen. VRXC, still partially phased through a wall, made an even more startling discovery. The creature, it can see me even when I'm out of phase. It's tracking my movement through dimensional barriers. Oh yeah, Zara said casually, cats can see things in other dimensions. We're pretty sure that's why they sometimes stare at empty corners and run around at 3 a.m. They're either seeing ghosts or interdimensional mice. MS. Kr Thick skeleton cycled through several new colors before settling on what would later be classified as existential crisis move. Addendum to official records, she clicked rapidly. Requesting immediate update to Earth classification. Current designation of Deathworld may be insufficient. Suggested new category, what is wrong with this planet and why does it work? The final breakthrough came when Professor Whiskers, having decided that enough scientific observations had been made, began distributing his attention among the students with the careful diplomacy of a seasoned politician. A head bump here, a purr there, and even a rare display of the coveted belly, though Zara quickly warned about the bear trap protocol this seemingly innocent invitation often concealed. I believe mess. Kr Thick finally admitted, watching her class become completely enchanted by what was essentially a miniature murder machine disguised in fur, that we have all grossly underestimated the complexity of Earth's ecosystem, and possibly the human capacity for turning deadly things into companions. Wait until I tell you about honeybees, Zara grinned. We basically domesticated tiny flying dart throwers because we liked their vomit. MS. Kr Thick's color shifted to what would become known in xenobiology circles as not today Satan green. As the class session drew to a close, MS. Kr Thick found herself facing several unexpected developments. First, her carefully organized desk had been transformed into what Zara called a cat-optimized workspace, which apparently meant everything important was now on the floor. Second, her students had somehow evolved from terror to adoration in the span of a single class period. And third, she was beginning to suspect that humans weren't so much Deathworlders as they were chaos cultivators. in light of today's enlightening presentation. Kr Thick announced, trying to maintain her authority while Professor Whiskers used her favorite laser pointer as a pillow. The Academy Board will be updating several policies. She pulled up the new guidelines on the holoscreen. Updated xenobiological safety protocols. 1. Earth pets are now classified as paradoxical entities rather than immediate threats. 2. All rooms must be equipped with scratch posts and toy mice as basic safety equipment. 3. The phrase "scaredy cat" is banned after causing diplomatic confusion. 4. Students are reminded that not all Earth predators are friend-shaped. 5. Emergency yarn supplies will be maintained in all classrooms. Furthermore, she continued, as Professor Whiskers performed his evening face-washing ritual with the dignity of a sacred ceremony, we'll be implementing a new cultural exchange program. Professor Whiskers has been appointed as our official class comfort predator. The announcement was met with enthusiastic approval, particularly from B. Lorp, who had not moved in 2 hours, still honored to serve as the chosen napping surface. Just remember, Zara added helpfully, he's available for emotional support and pest control, but he makes his own hours and union rules state that all pets must be voluntary. I still can't believe VRX, she mused, now fully phased back into normal space, that humans looked at the most efficient predators on their planet and decided, yes, this needs a silly name and a bell collar. To be fair, Zara shrugged, we did the same thing with wolves. Now we have creatures called Mr. Fluffles that fit in teacups. Kr Thick's antennae twitched at this new information, but she bravely chose not to pursue that particular line of inquiry. Some things were better left for future trauma. As the students began gathering their things, Professor Whiskers made his final power move of the day. With graceful precision, he arranged himself in Kr Thick's chair, assumed the loaf position, and began purring with the smugness of a being who knew they had just successfully conquered new territory. But that's my chair, Kr Thick protested weakly. Not anymore, Zara explained sympathetically. That's how cats work. Everything they sit on becomes legally theirs. It's like a very cute form of adverse possession. The instructor looked at her chair, then at her revised lesson plans now featuring tiny paw prints, and finally at her class, who had somehow survived an encounter with an apex predator and come out of it wanting more. You know, she clicked thoughtfully, her exoskeleton settling into a new shade that would later be termed acceptance with a side of existential wonder. Perhaps this explains much about humanity's approach to the galaxy. You don't just survive your death world, you make friends with it, give it treats, and convince it to sleep on your keyboard. Speaking of which, Zara pointed out, you might want to check your outgoing messages. Professor Whiskers just walked across your computer terminal. Kr Thick quickly accessed her communication system, only to discover that she had apparently just sent the Galactic Education Board a message consisting entirely of MMMRRRRRO. As the class filed out, Professor Whiskers surveyed his new domain from his throne, formerly known as the instructor's chair, wearing an expression that somehow combined divine satisfaction with mild disdain, a feat that only cats and certain ancient emperors had ever mastered. Next week, Zara called out cheerfully as she packed up her things, I'll tell you about how humans domesticated literally everything else. Ever heard of a hamster? It's like concentrated cuteness with pouches. Kr Thick's final color change of the day was officially recorded as preemptive stress leave purple.